Greetings and welcome to another live Audit Tuesday. Today we're joined by Surendra Pathak, CEO of Interlynk, to explore one of the fastest growing areas in cybersecurity, software supply chain risk and SBOM. We also have Grajek, CEO of YouAttest. Surendra, you first. Let's start with a quick intro and your background in the SBOM process.
Shannon, great to connect. Thank you for having me. And good morning, everyone. For whoever is in the West Coast or if you're in the middle of lunch, good afternoon. I'm Surendra Pathak. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Interlynk. We created Interlynk to help developers build secure software in regulated industries. When I say secure software, effectively we are focused on the areas that have been classically left behind, which is securing software supply chain, finding artifacts that are related to regulatory spaces and compliance, and helping them get across those challenging points through Interlink as a platform.
Great. Garret, why don't you now give the audience your background and identity and around access control?
Yeah. So greetings, and I know Shannon for a long time. I'm an identity guy. That's how I'm known. I was an identity guy. Got hired. Remember at Silence, and they said we're building AI and we need an identity guy. So they found Garret Grajek. I have worked at the companies, big ones like RSA, IBM, TI, and then built the first two-factor IDP, which was SecureAuth. And I went over to Silence and built AI and zero trust products. And now running YouAttest, which is by invention of a faster, better way to do access control and access certification. That is the process once we deploy the software that Surendra builds, and then how are we doing access control on it. All right, thanks for the question, Shannon. I'll let you take it away with question for Surendra and myself.
Perfect. All right, well, audience, so we're going to go back and forth and chat with our friends here and get to know all about access, SBOMs, and the life of security professionals. Surendra, you're working with organizations on SBOM every day. Where do you see software supply chain programs falling short when it comes to actually managing risk?
Absolutely, Shannon. And for people who are still getting familiar with SBOM, SBOM or software bill of material is a fundamental artifact that describes what is happening, what is included in a software. So because it's such a fundamental concept of basically knowing where the risk might come from, in regulated space, it has been adopted as like one of the de facto standard that regulators have already started looking at, for example, in medical devices, or will start looking at, for example, in Europe with Cyber Resilience Act, or in India with CSCRF. It's a global phenomena. People who have any sort of build pipeline and or supplier, they should be building SBOM because this is going to be the future of how risk gets described by developers, assessed by auditors and evaluators, and used by customers in the future. So that's a background of why SBOM has become such an important artifact. So where we see is everything is still early. DevSecOps is still learning about SBOM, is still figuring out how to basically make best use of it. Engineering teams are using it as a audit-ready artifact, so more for compliance than for driving in internal or customer with their suppliers. To us, that's the major gap. Almost all the product that we see in the market and all the focus has been, can I use SBOM to meet my compliance need, which is pretty natural. That is what business wants to succeed. At the same time, what we think is the power of SBOM and the power of way the specifications are evolving is to facilitate those conversations which used to happen in internal Slack and email, and then use that to speed up the entire DevSecOps operation. So what we are seeing is effectively SBOM is getting people through the compliance. The risk evaluation that can be programmatically expressed still needs work. And that's where platforms like Interlynk are focused right now.
No, that's great. That's great. Garret, now your turn. Where do you see this with access? And explain how YouAttest is benefiting or helping along this line.
We were Surendra and I were just talking right before we went live, and he was mentioning some of the big acts and compliance measures that are going around the world, and we focused a little on EU. We was talking about the new Resilience Act, and then I countered with EU DORA, which is for the friends in the financial world over there. Okay, the concept is we're all holding secure data. Okay, that's what these regulations are, and the regulations and the guidances. They're straight out the NIST, CSF 2.0s and 853. Basically spell out that enterprises, once the software is built, need to practice the principle of least privilege in how they're actually being deployed. Who has access to these applications? Who has access to the groups that has access to the networks? Who has access to the code when it was being developed? That's where YouAttest comes in. It comes in the third A in identity. There's authentication, authorization, and an audit. The third one is what we kind of do a little in a second, where we're auditing the access control. We're auditing the authorization on any application or identity resource. So that's YouAttest in a nutshell.
I mean, it's incredible. I've definitely seen it come a long way. So, Surendra, let's talk about your origin story. What led you to focus on SBOM automation at Interlynk, and what gaps were you seeing that traditional security or DevOps tools weren't solving?
Absolutely. And Shannon, I've been here in the Silicon Valley for now 25 years. I have worked in enterprise software. I have worked in startups. I've been part of a few significant exits in ad tech, most recently at a company called Tapjoy, where I was there for 8 years. And we got acquired by a public company back in 2022. I was running technology team, all of essentially both DevOps, security, product teams, as well as AI, and was responsible for security for some of the really sensitive data, some of the data that comes in ad tech, like how devices are, what devices are holding on to, and this was some of the largest advertiser in the world that are very familiar to anyone who has worked in advertising. So as an ad network, the responsibility becomes securing that data, but not only that, telling it to both our customers, which are advertisers, but also like business operations, like insurance providers. When we are in the middle of M&A, providing it to the CISO of the other company, there's a lot of risk expression that needs to be managed. And to my surprise, when I became responsible for all of that things now 6 years ago, almost all of that was done through essentially Zoom calls and walking people through PDF, which boggles your mind. As software runs the world, but we cannot express software risk programmatically. Luckily, I wasn't the only one looking at this problem. It was been the focus of federal and cybersecurity infrastructure security agency, CISA, was created with the task of figuring that out. In reality, that's where SBOM comes from. CISA was founded in 2019. One of the most famous person, Alan, started the CISA movement and the working group, and then it became part of executive order. So I saw it from day one, how the focus was to take the risk and express it in a way that is easily consumable. And I started to follow that with CISA working groups, and then realized it's going to need a bunch of tooling that we can do because we come from ad tech. We know how the data flows at scale and how to optimize it. So we started building this thing 5-6 years ago, and our goal is make it a natural part of DevOps. And all of this is new, as you were talking about. There is a concept of software composition beforehand, but those are all used for internal consumption, whereas promise of SBOM is it can make the risk move forward and backward through the entire supply chain.
That's incredible. I actually want to do a lead-on question before we go back to you, Garret. But it's, SBOMs generate a lot of data, components, dependencies, and vulnerabilities. What actually matters, right? Because you just said that there's a ton of information there, but what actually matters? What is important?
Yeah. So the way we think about it is SBOM data is similar to anyone who has worked with basically structured code. I am old enough that there was at one point, there was no source code repositories. People will build on their machines and then basically use it. And that made coordination really hard. But the tool set that got deployed, and now the GitHub and GitLab are the default for that, they allow that data to be created automatically that moves through the structure so that when I'm making a code change and passing out to Garret, Garret can actually comment on it without thinking about the hashes and the deltas that go behind the scene. We think today SBOM is being treated as write your code and then create your hashes that Garret will consume as delta. But platforms like Interlynk provide that option to make the data invisible and only come together when it actually matters. So our focus is not just creating a list of components that went in there, but also which of these components really matter, which of them are end of life, which of them are potentially malicious, which of them are actually used only by a couple of developers, and also where we cannot verify the identity of component in the first place, which might be coming from a malicious open source provider in the first place. So all those decisions and all those risks can be taken care because of programmatic nature of these artifacts in the first place. So yes, there is a lot of data that moves through the system, but if we do our job right, people will just focus on the layer that actually is actionable. Today, it's components, it's identity of users that are actually providing those components and their risk profile associated with it.
Love it. Love it. I mean, you're really talking about a lot of changes that has evolved over time, but it's also automation. So Garret, how has automation changed the game for your customers and even Surendra's type of customers in managing identity governance at scale?
Automation is the key. Automation is why we exist as software companies, and literally from the day one of this product, I took a wonderful external auditor. His name was Raj, and then I took a internal CTO, and he was both. One always was doing the audits, and the other one was, of course, responding with the information. And I took copious notes. I was like a 2-hour call, copious notes, and I went back to him. And what I looked at is, how do I take the process that they are doing manually with the exchanging of information, the exchanging of tickets, the exchanging of emails, and automate that? That's exactly what YouAttest did for the UAR, the user access review process. And then from there, as you say, this product has grown over the last 5.5 years. What I said is, we should follow the same steps of automation as does the zero trust maturity model, which says step 1 is manual, step 2 is automation, step 3 is where we actually take real-time events and start making actions on those. Okay, and that's what we did with the automation. Is we put triggers in the product that says, hey, if a identity or a entitlement, a key entitlement, like a group, like a permission changes, notify you immediately. And then step 4 is then when we actually take the metrics that the product creates, and that's what YouAttest does. It has metrics around your last access review.
It's going to be my next question to you is, how do you tie the metrics? So I love how you just did that already.
There you go. So as Shannon just asked me, what about the metrics, right? Good deal. Oh, good. The metrics are key in this, okay? Because if you're 0 step, you've got no metrics at all. You just got a manual process that's not working. That people are screaming at each other, who's done the access review? How come this guy isn't giving me his spreadsheet? Okay, we go up the ladder and we start adding automation to this, right? And now we got this. Now we have a first key metric. When's the last time anyone's reviewed this account? Or if they're reviewed? And what percentage of these accounts are reviewed? So we can get a metric on the individual account, we can get a metric on the group, and we can get a metric on how the organization is doing in general. That can be passed on to other providers. The other key metric, though, is what we developed is we have something called the AI-based identity trust score, which actually looks at the user and has many factors, but 3 key ones. First of all, does it have any segregation of duty violations? That's an obvious. That should have a low confidence score. Second is, when's the last time this thing's been reviewed? And I'm a big believer in it. I know, Shannon, you're huge in the GRC world. It's amazing how much work the world does in GRC and how little that goes back into the cyber group and says, okay, let's do it. Someone does it, they file it, and it's like that old Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's filed in some box, and back in the confines of some warehouse. That's not good governance. What we did is we said, if you're doing access reviews and you're being good, your identity trust score of the user can go up. Okay.
Right.
And then the last metric of what we did is we built AI and we said, hey, group entitlements, that's pretty obvious. Garret, you're a sales guy. Why the hell do you have admin rights into the AWS accounts? Why do you have admin rights over to the GCP, that type of stuff? And that would flag your signal lower. And that to me is documented the fourth step of the zero trust maturity model, where metrics like that aren't just in the GRC product, they're passed back into the cyber world. So that's where I'm always open to calls and all that we take our GRC metrics, which YouAttest is doing, and then pass it back into the other products.
No, that's great. That's great. And that goes right into you, Surendra, talking about like impact and decision making, right? When organizations, have access to so much information, how do you put this? So it's like when organizations gain true SBOM visibility, right? And this could be through access or other means, what starts to change? What decisions can security or engineering leaders make that they couldn't before, right?
Yeah, and this is a great question because there is, as you guys are aware, SBOM, we were talking about SBOM started on the regulatory side. So there are specific regulations. They are expecting a fully complete SBOM in a specific format to be delivered as part of regulatory compliance requirement. And most of the customers that come to us come from that mindset. Oh, I have a 510K approval coming up. So there is my medical device. Can you help us create a SBOM that FDA will be comfortable with? But when they get on a platform like Interlynk, what they are looking at is not just the final SBOM, but we can integrate them as early as first line of coaching. So anyone who is just getting started on a Python project and has a couple of PyPy libraries, they can totally go and basically, with the first pull request, generate an SBOM and see things like how far behind this library is from the mainline. So that becomes a technical debt in the long term. They can also see what is this component's overall history, how many developers are helping build this thing. That becomes a maintainability risk in the product. Then they can also see things like, when was the last time this was updated? And has it been too long that FDA might consider it to be obsolete because of most recent requirement in 510K? That could become a risk for essentially maintainability, but risk on the final product developer as well. So those are the classic way people surface information that was not readily available in the past. But what is actionable out of that? In reality, we have example of a product that came in with 4,000 components. They went through Interlynk's filters that allowed us to figure out what is actually actionable or not. And then they ended up with less than 187 of those being actually impacting. So it's a very common trend that we say that as soon as the product context come in picture, majority of action item that can be generated from SBOM collapse into very small things that you have to do. And if this habit persists over the long term, it allows technical debt to go down. So as I started out, people come to us for regulatory compliance. They deploy us as part of development, and then they realize it helps them create a clean development posture that helps the entire organization. So, and in our experience, it's generally around 5% of the total findings that are truly impactful for these companies.
I love this. I love this. And that really kind of goes right into you, Garret, about real-time angle. Most identity programs are periodic. What real-time capabilities does YouAttest provide when access or identity changes occur?
Yeah, like the little minor incident they had out there in the MGM Caesars World a couple of years ago, right? Where they attacked the IAM, okay? And no reason to mention it. I mean, it was just an IAM that was attacked. It wasn't the vendor's fault. It's just, one more IAM. What we've done in our product is, because they created new admins and then constructed new IAM rules and policies accordingly with their control. Okay, what we built in ours, and I mentioned this before, was the access triggers. When the entitlements change in your key groups and entitlements, you should know. And what the enterprises that deployed our product with the IAMs, what they've done is that not only the GRC people get those triggers when a key entitlement changes, which is good because auditors at the end of the quarter and the year say, all right, show me all the key material changes in your identity controls, okay, and they have all that list. But the companies that use this product, they also send those alerts over to the security people, so they can look at them and say, okay, I need to know, if these are nefarious or if these are legitimate. So that's number one, is triggers on key entitlements, and number two is the identity trust score, which is a real-time AI score that you can look at, and then you can imbibe it into your other products for real-time decision processes. It falls under the concept of shared signals, which we're actively working with companies to take our identity trust score and make it a shared signal into their authorization processes.
No, great. Now lead into that. What are some of the biggest identity risks you see around developers? Because then I'm going to go right over to Surendra and ask him his thoughts on this, because realistically, right, we're talking about SBOMs, we're talking about development. So tell me, what are you seeing around developers, CI, CD, pipelines, and build systems? Garret, that's you.
Oh, that's for me. Okay. No. Okay, there you go.
That's you first before I head over.
Watch this, people. I'm actually going to try to use this and show a slide that I think the biggest risk is something that we're all working on, all that. And let me see, add the stage. So here is a sample like AI development. Okay, I'll talk about AI and all that, but what's the governance? And most relevant to this topic, what is the identity governance that should be around AI? And if you read the NIST AI RMF or ISO 4201, it goes into the not only what your policy should be and what the ethics is, but especially ISO 4201, it says your key participants in the process of Surendra's world of creating the software all the way to the deployment of the AI must be governed. That is, they must be quantified, identified, and then certified. Okay? They are okay, great. Who's actually using the AI in this case? This has to be quantified. What do you know what your users are? Okay? Second of all, who's the people managing the actual deployment of it? That has to be quantified and identified. And a third one, and this is the real one that it gets this, who's all the engineers? What are the engineers that actually develop this software? And actually, Surendra's stuff is Interlynk is extremely relevant here, but that should be quantified, identified, and then attested to in a way such that YouAttest provides. Fourth, the data. Okay, who had access? Who is a chain of custody on your data? Okay, who had access originally? Who created the data? Who had access when it was stored? And who had access when it was retrained? And then finally, okay, who is supporting all these other mechanisms? Okay, and they have access. Are they quantified and are they identified? This is where a lot of governance around software and especially AI developments are falling flat, is we have not quantified these groups and do it in a repeatable fashion that we can document.
Now, Surendra, your thoughts. This is where we got to go to you. But SBOM shows what's in the software, but not who can change it. How do you think about that gap between software visibility and access control? And what are you guys doing about it? Because clearly you're doing something.
Yeah, so SBOM as an artifact, if it's shipping just like a HTTP packet over the internet, it's not useful because anyone can go and meddle with it in between. And that is essentially receiving something from a supplier that is not accurate. But the good thing is SBOM as an artifact actually supports digital signing, digital attestation, and making sure when it arrives, it can be validated independently. This is where Garret's and our world overlap quite a bit, because SBOM is a box that contains some information, but do you know that that package was produced by the entity that you actually hold responsible? So from our vantage point, the both thing together is what makes software supply chain secure. It's the SBOM generation in an automated fashion, but basically using authorities and identities associated with it that are allowed to make sure that the pipeline has been inspected before it, so that they can attest that up to this point, the pipeline is intact and provide digital signatures associated with it. And then it can pass down now with certainty to the downstream customer that can do it. And I can give you a practical example of how it happens. The financial services right now, one of our Interlynk customer, they have assigned specific developers from one of the supplier to sign the SBOM for them. Those identities are managed by these financial services companies, but developer don't belong to that organization. Developer belongs to the supplier. So the whole process of basically cryptographic evidence and then audit traceability being produced is part of their SBOM workflow. SBOM is still SBOM, the content is there, but an identity has been overlaid to make sure they can, in case of any incident, contain the blast for it.
That's great. Now before we move back to Garret, forward-looking vision, right? For your last question, as you look ahead 12 to 24 months, how do you see SBOM and software supply chain security evolving in the broader cyber risk conversation?
Yeah, this is a great question because in light of essentially what happened in March, which I don't know if you guys are following, post-quantum world where quantum computers are about to begin prediction, took a leap forward. So Google came out with a research report that said essentially number of qubits they expect is dramatically lower than what they initially expected. And their own target is to get ready for post-quantum by 2029. That tells us something about it. So the way I think about it, essentially, we have built infrastructure last 40 years, have been this rise of open source and shared code environment. It started with essentially people putting code online and then turned into a GitHub repository, turned into package manager and frameworks. And now we are setting 40 years worth of code written by a lot of parties and then shared across without any consideration for what it means to share securely. So we are realizing that today, which means we need insight into how that ecosystem works in the first place. There are a few recent attacks like XCUtil a couple of years ago and then NPM just last month. These are showing cracks in how the foundation were built. These are showing examples of we have trusted developers too blindly. There is actually just yesterday, developers have asked for a basically authenticated chain of custody for any artifact. But all these things, all this data needs to move on a structured railway, which is what SBOM provides. SBOM provides a mechanism to move data around. We have relied on the data that has been required by regulated industries right now, which is essentially composition. But as we move and look forward, more data is being added. So when anti-IA minimum element came out with SBOM requirements, the data was composition, relationship, and then details about who is managing it. When you look at the CRA has moved and started to include something like hashes and something like N-level depth. If you go to CSCRF talks about certain download links. So the trains are getting ready. The amount of data being put on SBOM is growing. And the goal here is to cover everything that gets touched to the software supply chain effectively. Every developer that is involved, when they got involved, how to produce that. So we get really excited about where Cyclone DX and SPDX are evolving with 3.0 security profile in SPDX, and Cyclone DX now has essentially function call and signatures for the function, how they were evaluated. They are not in regulations yet, but tomorrow's regulation will start to ask about, okay, now we know how that SBOM was generated. Can you give me audit trail of all the steps that you take? Can you tell me what tool did you run to get to that audit trail? That is the space where everything end to end can be basically secured. So we are taking incremental steps because regulatory also doesn't want to shake things up in one batch. But with the way we are looking at FDA and also CRA, the goal here is to make it secure, not just create an artifact. And it's going to be incremental steps every year.
Nope, that is true. Well, it's always incremental because nobody wants the Wall Street Journal newspaper explaining how the world's coming to an end. So they slowly do it, which makes it almost easier to get things done, I should say, kind of. But can also create panic in a different way. So Garrett, for the last question before we start going into both the Interlynk and YouAttest demos, most organizations look at SBOMs as a vulnerability or compliance exercise. How does identity governance help organizations actually operationalize SBOM findings into actionable security controls?
Yeah, operationalize. That's what they're talking. Repeated and quantified. Okay, and that's what I brought up those last slides where I said, let's come up with a way, which was the first wonderful question, to automate something that we know we should be doing. And if we automate it, then we can make it repeatable, and we can then abstract it out from, well, Bob used to know how to do these user access reviews, but he left, so we don't really do them anymore. Okay, which is, I hear these conversations, Whereas if we quantify it through a process that YouAttest has created, which I'll show in the demo, then we can say, great, we can operationalize. When we come up with a new set of software, we can just apply that right into the practices of that. And if we come up with a new concept of software like AI, we can just go and we can just apply the mechanisms that we'll show in the demo, the step in them that we quantify the users, quantify the apps, quantify the managers, automate the process, and then the attestations are then not only documented, but then repeatable. So that's where I would say that's where YouAttest comes into the SBOM process of help quantifying, identifying, and attesting to the users and the entitlements involved in a repeatable way.
I love it. I love it. Well, now it's the time for us to do some demos. So, Surendra, do you want to start with your demo? And then Garrett, you'll go right into yours.
Absolutely.
Sure thing. Give me a second. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
100%.
Yeah. So Interlynk basically works like having a small library that goes in your build pipelines or generating SBOM automatically through webhooks for source code repository. What we are looking at is a executive dashboard that targeted toward a specific environment. We call this one production. There are a few more available. And each environment comes with what is the state of SBOM in terms of a specific compliance, and TIA being a common one, but also FDA, CRA, BSITR, Open Telco. What are the key gaps in that? What are the vulnerabilities? What are the products in the specific life stages associated with it? And then grouping by business unit, and then state of vulnerabilities, exploitability, and metrics around that. So that's the top level view. If I get to a product in case of Interlynk is an abstract entity that can capture a code base. It can capture a microservice. It can capture a build pipeline, or it can capture a complex object like all microservices delivered as a single product. So these are the ways we tend to meet regulatory requirement, where FDA doesn't want to know about every single library that you are internally developing. What they want to know is the device that you will deploy in customer environment. So we take responsibility of generating SBOM for the library as well as the final product. It's possible to do it automatically. So if you can add manually, but also integration through Bitbucket, GitHub, Azure DevOps, and all of that. If we go in a specific environment, we are looking at the product. Let's go into developer. So whenever developers are making any changes, SBOM gets generated automatically. So if anyone wants to compare what happens between these two SBOMs, you can see what components have been added or removed, what are the vulnerabilities associated with each one, and is it getting fixed. So this gives you a level to observe how development is moving. One thing you might note is we don't talk about SBOM as much, even though it's a complete SBOM automation platform. Our goal is to focus on things that developers are already familiar with. So you will see things like versions, things like product lifecycle, things like code bases connected. As we jump into a specific version, this summarizes all the stuff that we know from the SBOM. So this has a bunch of components, a bunch of parts that make up the final product, components in each one, a set of vulnerabilities associated with everything, a bunch of metadata around it, a graph that describes essentially a relationship between every component. And this is where it starts to help. When the next log4j happens and someone is looking for a log4 library, they can come in here and look for it where it finds they can also see related to open source benchmark, what is the health of the component and versions associated with it. They can also see how does it look in terms of compliance, especially anti-IA is the one selected for this. You can get more details about this over here where we cover other ones like anti-IA's breakdown by what is needed, FDA's breakdown by what are the fields. A more interesting one is BSI for EU CRA next year. But that's the compliance piece. That's are the pieces that if you are going to deliver it for regulators, these are the things you will look at. What will help them develop is everything else. So Doctor is a feature that we are rolling out. Its goal is to tell you within the SBOM, what we think we don't trust from the generator in the first place and how to fix it. So that will be missing identity. A component, we don't know what it is. Can you help us figure it out? And the goal with that is now you have whole vulnerability management operations, which I'm hoping I can show you. Okay, everything. This is your vulnerability list. It has everything you need to prioritize, triage, analyze with an AI, added CVSS, advisories, EPSS tracking, and integrated regs. Basically, every operation that we know app security and product security teams does. What we do further is actually automate this entire process. So if you know what is the disposition for this vulnerability, you can automatically create ticket around it, set up a license policy failure around it, which sends you notification into Slack, email, or Jira, or any other way you consume. And that's just basically a 1,000-foot view over it. We have an integrated package manager to get you everything you need from open source, integrated system to get it from vendors, integrated vulnerability management so that your incident response for new vulnerabilities could be super fast, a license manager to do open source entire license audit, a flexible policy engine, and all sort of enterprise features. The most interesting thing that we are really proud of it is SBOM is new. People are still figuring it out how to adopt, and they have questions. This button takes you to a human, and that human will be able to answer any questions you have about SBOM. So in a world of AI, I don't know if it's a flex or not to say you will be talking to our developers if you're using platform quite a bit. With that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Shannon.
And I'm going to punt it right over to you, Garret. It's your turn.
Fantastic. And I like what Surendra said. I mean, we know that Interlynk could do a lot more than that, but at 1,000-foot level. So that was really well done. Okay. So he set the bar high. Okay. So let me pick a screen, any screen. Okay. Okay. Can you guys, oh no, that's not it. Add the stage. There you go. So this is our GUI, and we go in, and this is the GRC person, someone in Shannon's shoes. It could be an MSP or consultant, or it could be the GRC person on site at the enterprise. They go to their tenant, they select a source, and I can show this. They basically say, okay, we're going to do a finance SOX audit, and we'll make this 0526. Okay, and pick a date that it should be done. Okay, we got advanced workflow, we got SOD rules. We can even upload helper files. We're just going to go with a simple audit here, and we're going to be. This is a application audit, so it's pulling from another SaaS resource some finance application. Now, we have customers that run as many as 900,000 roles through this thing at a time. So you can do a percentage. I'm going to just do 100%. Okay. So this thing, now YouAttest is going out to the cloud and pulling down all the entitlement data. What's really relevant is we do not imbibe authentication credentials. Okay. So how is it going and talking to those right there? We have these connectors already built in. Okay, in this case, I can go right here, and that's the on-premise. I'm going to go to the cloud one because we're using the cloud right here, and that's literally just a bunch of sample settings, real straightforward. I can help you on those, or when that goes out. What you'll also see while this thing is running is you'll see our templates. We have all these things that we learned how to help customers. Automation was the GRC Captain Shannon asked early on. We have automated the process of all these emails, and you can modify them as you wish. Okay, let's go back to the audit. And just FYI, this is your dashboard. You got applications audits, you got group audits, you got events audits, we even have file share, SharePoint audits. You've been following that Storm 2949 attack. That's exactly what that's relevant on. Okay, let's go and hit here. This is, remember I said finance for SOX.1. Okay, what's relevant here, and a quick blow up, is you've got all these different users, and I got different managers. Okay, I got this manager, YA manager. I've got this manager and this manager. YouAttest quantified all the different managers, and yeah, I can drill down into it. I can maybe add comments. I can look at assigned applications, assigned groups. But what's really should be done at this stage is an auto delegation. Use YouAttest's ability to push out. Okay, to push out the certification out to the proper resource. Okay, and that's exactly what we're doing here. We're saying, let's get this one. Actually, this one certified. Okay, we go here, and now that's pushing out auto delegation out to a different manager. Now, just to show you, see that beep? That was my other voice. That was the manager itself. Just received a delegation email. And they don't have to go through spreadsheets. They don't have to go through all that mess. What they're going to be seeing here is the user that they say reports to them. Okay? So they can drill down on all the details, and they can certify, revoke, or even redelegate. Gosh, Garret moved over to Bob's group, that kind of stuff. But really what is often done is they say, let's just certify that. And then YouAttest does that really ugly job that saves your weekends and all that kind of stuff by aggregating all the certifications and then creating a quantifiable report that has been reviewed by all the big ones, the Deloittes, the PwCs, the Accentures, etc. Okay, that's
incredible. Everyone's gonna have to rewatch this recording multiple times.
Yes, there you go.
Well, so we're here to wrap it up now. So I guess could the both of you give us some closing remarks, and we'll be closing up now.
Take it away, Surendra.
No, it was exciting to be here. Thanks for having me. And I think this is a start of a new way of thinking about software risk. I tend to think like there is a 10-year history into how software risk has evolved. This is the programmatic phase. The programmatic phase needs a lot of stuff. Specification that allows people to communicate. It needs identity to make sure the right people are making claims, and it needs independent evaluation of that claims. So what we are responding to is a set of attacks that are happening on each of these factors. YouAttest, Interlynk, all these are different pieces that are trying to solve those specific pieces. But we always work together. Like in these contexts, that's the only way we can make the entire software supply chain secure. To you, Garret?
Yeah, and I would say this, and let's make it, obviously this is live. Access control matters, people. Shannon, I know you got kids. I know you log onto Canvas, okay? That thing was down. That thing was down, and it got hacked, and they got a $10 million ransom. Why was that? Well, it looks like most reports say it went through the free for teacher portal. Access certification, access changes. Those matter, right? So they went through the free for teachers, and then they went to town and got more restrictive rights added to their credentials. That's the kind of stuff we have to be monitoring, and that's the kind of stuff that YouAttest does. And to be blunt, that's also what Shannon does. She helps out people with their GRC and cyber practices. So we at YouAttest could be just reach me, Garret Grajek, or hit me at info@youattest.com.
Love it. Well, thank you guys both for your time today. This has been amazing, and I look forward for the next session.
Thanks a lot, Shannon. Thanks, Surendra. Great stuff.
Good to talk to you guys. Take care.